All right, welcome back to Overcome Babylon. I'm Abraham Ojeda. Today we're talking about nuclear war, specifically a study that was released by Rutgers University. Very interesting, and I think it's really worth paying attention to because I think it ties into a prophecy that's mentioned 3 times in the Gospels. And also, we're going to be talking about some other breaking news. So really excited to talk about this and dive in and see the prophetic elements and what the scriptures reveal to us about these things and these crazy times that we're living in. So let's dive in. All right, so first things first. Let's go to the countdown on the website. Again, maybe if you're new to the podcast, maybe you haven't checked out any previous episodes, go to overcomebabylon.com, download the 70 Shabua decoded presentation, and see exactly how I determined the date of the abomination of desolation to be next year on Friday, September 22nd, 2023. Again, I'm not the only one to do this. There's others, but it's just I've put it together in a nice presentation for you to download for free. Check that out. But the abomination of desolation is well on its way, and the drums of war just keep pounding and drumming and beating every single week. It's pretty insane. And really quick, before we dive into some interesting things I want to talk about today, I just was released from the hospital 2 days ago with appendicitis. Got that taken care of. Was basically in hell for like 24 hours, tons of pain, so my voice is a little shot today. I'm just excited to be doing this episode because I've been wanting to talk about this for a couple weeks actually, because the study I'm about to talk about, credit to whom credit is due. I first saw it on Infowars.com. It says nuclear war between U.S. and Russia would wipe out 5 billion people, and I was like, all right, this looks like a sensational headline. You know, this looks like, I don't know, looks like they're just kind of starving for attention. But let me just check this out, because obviously I talk about nuclear war a lot on this podcast, and I talk about how it ties into Scripture and all of these amazing biblical prophetic elements. And this article was written by Paul Joseph Watson, and he basically just says, hey, there's a new study that came out from Rutgers University, and it says that if Russia and the United States went to war, or nuclear war, 2/3 of the planet would die. I'm like, okay. 2/3 of the planet would die. Okay, this is interesting. I need to look at this. So, I've already done a blog about this. If you want to go check out the blog, feel free to do so. Because I give all the links. I give like all the little, citations, all that. I'll include a link to that blog down below in the video description or the podcast description. But one thing I want to really look at is, unlike other prophecy channels that you might check out on YouTube or whatever. I'm not on YouTube. But if you're looking at prophecy, you're looking at people who are talking about prophecy, you look at all these churches, organizations, whatever, hardly any of them have done the diligence and have basically admitted at one point or another that their interpretation is wrong about the 490 years when talking about the 70 weeks of Daniel. And really what the scriptures tell us is that it's 70 shabua. So again, I just want to draw your attention to this. 70 shabua. A shabua is a 49-year period. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out episodes 2 through 7 of the podcast. But the year 2020, as I show you on the screen here, this is the final 49-year period that we're living in right now. The year 2020 was the exact middle when crazy stuff started happening with COVID, and there's a reason why things started getting really out of control and really insane after the year 2020, because we reached the middle of the 70 Shabua. There are specific things that we're told about the middle of the 70th week, 70th Shabua in Hebrew, of course. And things are just getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And, before we dive into this university study, I think we should just look at Matthew 24 again. Now, I talk about Matthew 24 a lot, but this is what it says in verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is in the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. Let him who is in the field not go back and get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days and pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive, or no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise up and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Then it says, therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Now, here's the key verse for today. I've already shown you that the abomination of desolation is going to happen next year. According to everything that I've shown you, all the timeline, the dates of Daniel chapters 11 and 12, everything that I've shown you, the 1,290 days, like it all fits that next year, guess what? It not only is going to be during the winter time, according to the Bible's definition of winter, but it's also going to be on a Sabbath. Most likely it'll be Friday night. So it'll be the definition of a Sabbath because Sabbath begins on Friday night. September 22nd, 2023 will be the date of the abomination of desolation. And he literally says, if it happens on winter or on Shabbat, then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world, nor ever shall be. That's verse 21. And verse 22, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So this is the key verse and we're going to focus on today, all right? Key verse. I know I talk about Matthew 24 a lot, but we haven't made this connection yet. Matthew 24:29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So after the tribulation of these days, after the abomination of desolation, because that's exactly what it's describing here. And by the way, you also see this in Luke 21 and Mark 13. So immediately after the abomination of desolation, it's going to happen on winter and Shabbat. That's going to be horrible. Then he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light. So that's where I want to draw your attention today to check out this article. Okay, this is from Rutgers University, New Jersey, all right? Nuclear war would cause a global famine and kill billions, Rutgers-led study finds. So this is what it says, even a nuclear conflict between new nuclear states would decimate crop production and result in widespread starvation. More than 5 billion people would die of hunger following a full-scale nuclear war between the U.S. and Russia, according to a global study, okay, that estimates post-conflict crop production. So what I'm going to show you, we're going to dive into a little bit more, is that it's not that it's the nuclear bombs themselves being dropped in major cities, on military bases, on warships, out in the ocean somewhere. It's not necessarily those things that are going to lead to 5 billion people dying. I mean, that is a lot of people. It's the fact that crop production is going to be affected by nuclear war. And so let's dive into that. Under even the smallest nuclear scenario, a localized war between India and Pakistan, global average caloric production, so calories being produced, decreased 7% within 5 years of the actual conflict. In the largest war scenario tested, a full scale, which is what I've been warning about. This is what I've been warning about a lot, right? A full scale USA-Russia nuclear conflict would cause worldwide production of calories to be decreased by about 90% 3 to 4 years after the fighting. It says that crop declines would be the most severe in the mid to high latitude nations, including major exporting countries such as Russia and the United States, which could trigger export restrictions and cause severe disruptions in import-dependent countries in Africa and the Middle East, which are, there's a lot, the Middle East is full of countries, so is Africa, where they're very import-heavy. They rely on grain from the Ukraine. They rely on rice from other countries. They rely on things big time. So this is my focus today. Let's talk about this. Let's look at this. But before we do, I know what you might be thinking, because if you checked out my interview with Cyrus Harding, he said that the idea of a nuclear winter is totally false. And actually, what all these data, all these models are basing this die-off, this destruction of humankind, they're basing their findings on the fact that they're saying that the sun actually will be blotted out and the moon will be blotted out by soot in the atmosphere, and there won't be enough photosynthesis to support crop production to feed humanity anymore. So we're going to get to that. Maybe I jumped the gun a little early, but I want to show you and remind you what Cyrus Harding said. And I probably need to interview him again to ask him about this, and just pick his brain, like what why is it that a nuclear winter is not true? Because these guys are saying it is. I'm not totally sold. I don't know. It's a mainstream university. Sadly, science has become very discredited since COVID in 2020 and pushing a bunch of propaganda and a bunch of lies. So it is hard to know what to believe at this point. I just thought I'd bring this up because it's extremely interesting and relevant to the discussion that's already been happening on this podcast. But let's go ahead and let's go revisit what Cyrus had to say a couple months ago about a nuclear winter.
This idea of a nuclear winter is totally false. Okay, get that out of your head. It's totally false. What will happen is you'll have 2 weeks where the radiation is really bad and you would have to stay indoors. But if you're soldiers, you're going to be wearing protective equipment anyway. But the idea here is China has to take all the military installations on the coast quickly so that they can land troops on the coast of the United States, because the troops that are represented by the black arrows are going to go up the backside of the Rocky Mountains.
So there you have it. So Cyrus, he says it'll be a short, quick 2 weeks of fallout from neutron bombs hitting major military installations. There won't be this widespread nuclear back and forth. It's not going to happen that way. The U.S. is going to be defeated quickly, swiftly, and it's going to be different than what the media might be portraying. Or in this case, this article was just released, like I said, maybe 3 weeks ago. So it wasn't even out when Cyrus and I had that conversation, but he's basically saying, don't believe the hype. And I understand that, because if you go to a website called futureoflife.org, it literally is like an activism website that's all about promoting the idea of a nuclear winter. And that makes me kind of nervous, because it just seems like, I don't know, it seems kind of like deep state. It seems kind of like fake. It just seems kind of fake. It just seems very fabricated and pushed to like scare people of the idea of a nuclear winter, to be honest. But that's called futureoflife.org. It's the Future of Life Institute. It's all against, like, it's all anti-nuclear war or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on this one, but let's look at this study, and then let's go back and look at some scriptures. And I think we're going to connect some dots here that, quite frankly, I don't think too many people are connecting dots right now, when we should be really looking at this very seriously, because it's so real, it's so relevant, it's such a possibility. I really do think that there will be nuclear war between nations, of course, within the final shabua that we're living in. The question is, how bad is it going to get? So this is what this study shows. And so the study is entitled Global Food Insecurity and Famine from Reduced Crop, Marine Fishery, and Livestock Production Due to Climate Disruption from Nuclear War Soot Injection. So before I start reading, it's interesting. A lot of the findings in this research article, they're based off of models, statistical models. They're based off of computer-generated models, yes, using legitimate methods of science and so forth. But just understand that, like, it's based off of volcanic eruptions, a lot of it actually. Maybe not all of it, but there's a good bit of commentary that has to do with volcanic eruptions and how those affect crop production and light penetration from the sun to the earth. It is pretty interesting. They do, there's some very interesting commentary. I do recommend checking out the article. But it does kind of extrapolate a little bit of, okay, here's what happens during volcanic eruptions. Here's what we can expect from nuclear bombs to go off. So this is what it says. Atmospheric soot loadings from nuclear weapon detonation would cause disruptions to the Earth's climate, limiting terrestrial and aquatic food production. Here we use climate, crop, and fishery models to estimate the impacts arising from 6 scenarios of stratospheric soot injection, predicting the total food calories available in each nation post-war after stored food is already consumed. In quantifying impacts away from target areas, we demonstrate that soot injections larger than 5 TG would lead to mass food shortages, and livestock and aquatic food production would be unable to compensate for reduced crop output in almost all countries. So let's keep going. Let's keep reading here what they found. And like I said, the first thing that they're going to talk about is volcanoes. So extraordinary events such as large volcanic eruptions or nuclear war could cause sudden global climate disruptions and affect food security. Global volcanic cooling caused by sulfuric acid aerosols in the stratosphere has resulted in severe famines and political instability. For example, after the 1783 Laki eruption in Iceland, or the 1815 Tambora eruption in Indonesia. And it goes on. I want to show you, there's a particular line here, because they're also talking about forest fires. So recent catastrophic forest fires in Canada in 2017 and Australia in 2019 and 2020 produced 0.3 to 1 TG of smoke. So TG, pardon my ignorance here. I'm not sure what the measure is. I'm sure it's tons or something, some kind of measure. But they're saying that that particular amount was present because of the fires. And what they're saying is it was transported around the world and lasted for many months. What they're saying is this adds confidence to our simulations that predict the same process would occur after nuclear war. So again, these are models, these are scientific ideas. Take it with a grain of salt, right? But they're predictions. They're saying, hey, if volcanoes are this bad, Indonesia, Iceland, back in the day, if these recent wildfires were bad, hey, maybe nuclear war would produce these many TG, quantities of smoke in the air, soot, and travel around the world and cause all kinds of issues. So they're saying nuclear war would primarily contaminate soil and water close to where nuclear weapons were used. But the soot disperses globally once it reaches the upper atmosphere. So they're saying our results are globally relevant regardless of the warring nations. And there's some charts. I could walk you through those. I think they're interesting. I just kind of want to get to the nitty-gritty and show you the conclusion of the matter. So let's just go to the conclusion of the matter. Here's what it says. The reduced light, global cooling, and likely trade restrictions after nuclear wars would be a global catastrophe for food security. The negative impact of climate perturbations on the total crop production can generally not be offset by livestock and aquatic food. More than 2 billion people could die from a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Jeez, just think about that. And more than 5 billion could die from a war between the United States and Russia. So I think you get the main point. If you really want to geek out on the data, the code, everything that they do, feel free to do so. Basically, what I'm going to show you now is table number 1. This really summarizes the whole thing. If there's 5 TG of soot in the atmosphere, that would result in a quarter of a billion people dead or without food by the end of year 2. If we go all the way down and look at a soot load in the atmosphere of 150 TG, meaning that, so for the 5 TG, only 100 nuclear weapons were detonated. But if there's 150 TG of soot in the atmosphere, they're saying that 4,400, so 4,400 weapons need to be detonated in order for that much soot to be produced from the explosions of buildings, whatever happens to be the target, whether it's factories, munitions facilities. It really depends on the target how much actual soot there's going to be. They're saying that if there is the 4,400 number of weapons detonated, which would result from a wide-scale conflict between U.S. and its allies, Russia and its allies, it would cause 5 billion people to be without food at the end of year 2 after the bombs have already dropped. So, this is exactly what we already read. Because if you go back, it says in Matthew 22, 24, 22, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So the important thing that I really want to focus on here is that this study is saying, hey, during the tribulation of these days, the abomination of desolation, I mean, they don't know that's what they're talking about. They don't know the biblical prophetic elements of Daniel chapter 9. They don't know the 70 shabua like you and I do. They don't know these things. They're saying, oh, this could happen if nuclear war takes place because of soot in the atmosphere. They're saying that 2/3 of the people on this planet will be dead or starving from a large-scale nuclear war. Actually, what Yeshua is saying is that 100% of people would be dead unless the days are shortened. Unless the days are shortened. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is I can't think of too many other scenarios here where Matthew 24, literally, we're about to enter the abomination of desolation next year, going into 2024, 2025, 26, 27, 28, going into these next few years, I don't really see with how the geopolitics, how everything is being played out, how the stage is being set, how the US is being destroyed from within. Europe, Australia, Canada, UK, they're all being destroyed from within. Their energy is being sucked dry. The inflation's going through the roof. All of the issues with the vaccine, you name it, on and on and on. I don't see another option for basically the destiny of humanity at this point. I don't see another option on the table that would make our master in heaven, Yeshua, already tell us way in advance. He already told us, unless these days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. It makes a lot of sense to me that it is going to be a nuclear war. It is going to be not just between, two countries in Asia. It's going to be a large-scale nuclear war that we're going to be facing, and unless the days are shortened, no flesh would survive. And what's interesting, again, going back to the key verse for today, Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of the days of the abomination of desolation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. This eerily, this weirdly, oddly coincides with what this study is saying. Just like volcanoes and wildfires and things that explode and launch things in the atmosphere, travel around the world and blot out the sun, a nuclear war of the size that it looks like it is inevitable at this point would absolutely cause the sun to be darkened and the moon to not give its light anymore. And that's what Matthew 24:29 is all about. But again, these ideas they're all repeated in Luke 21. Luke 21:25, and there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. That's Luke 21:25. And then it says in Mark 13:24, but in those days after that tribulation, the abomination of desolation, that crazy time period, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. To be honest with you, I don't understand what it means, like in Matthew or Mark, where it says the stars of heaven will fall and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. I don't totally understand that, to be honest. I'm not going to pretend like I do. But what I can tell you is that this Rutgers University study that collaborated with a lot of universities to put it together, what they're saying lines up with what I have been already forecasting and showing you from scriptures to the exact day of the abomination of desolation. And it's just, it's it's unnerving. It's kind of, it can be anxious. It can be overwhelming. So, what I'll say is, remember what Yeshua told us. Pray that you're counted worthy to escape all of these things and to stand before the Son of Man. Let me see. It's in Luke 21. Oh, where is it? I have to look for it. Hang on. Yeah, there it is. It's at the very end. Luke 21:36. Watch therefore and pray that you may be counted worthy to escape all the things that will come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. So that has to be our prayer. We're you and I, we're of the few people that actually understand the timing of all these events. So many people are just guessing. So many people are waiting for a rapture to take place. And then the 7-year, what they call the 7-year tribulation period, can begin. That's just total nonsense. That's not supported by what we've been shown in Daniel with the 70 shabua or the 120 shaneh of mankind from Moses in Genesis 6:3. Okay? So you and I have the unique privilege of praying so that we can escape. He literally says, do this. So it's not a bad thing. If you have friends or family, loved ones that aren't praying this, I'm sorry, right? And I do too. If they're not praying that they're counted worthy and doing the things that Yeshua commanded us to do, to be obedient to his instructions, to his commandments, to his Torah, hey, that's why this information is super. It's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, yes, let's pray that we're counted worthy. Let's escape. On the other hand, it hurts because you know that people are going to be caught up in this. They're not praying. They're not watching. They're living like nothing's going on. They're living like it's just another day. It's just, yeah, inflation's bad. Yeah, COVID was bad. All this stuff was bad. But, life's going to get better. Oh, things will get better. Things always turn around. They don't understand that we're entering the tribulation of some heavy-duty days that are mentioned 3 times in the Gospels. I mean, this is heavy stuff. And if we go to Zechariah, there's a connection that I haven't made this connection yet in the podcast. Zechariah 14, it says, behold, the day of Yehovah is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Now you might think to yourself, well, this sounds like this already happened in the past, It was conquered, Jerusalem was conquered by Babylon, no big deal. People have conquered Jerusalem. This has already kind of happened before. But if you keep reading, it says, then the Lord will go forth, then Yehovah will go forth. This is Zechariah 14:3, and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, half of it towards the south, and it keeps going. But my point in bringing this up is that what is he saying that he's going to do in these very end times, very end days? I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. That is exactly what we read in Luke 21, and it says in 21:20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. That's next year. That is next year. Let's watch. Let's be ready. Before I move on here, there's something that I want to show you. Again, just showing you that the drums of war are beating hard. There's a new 600 million arms package for Ukraine. This marks the 21st time that the U.S. draws from its own stockpiles. The Biden administration keeps throwing money, weapons for free. It's not something that's, it's not a lease. It's not, pay us back. No. It's just for free to Ukraine. They have now spent $15.1 billion, which you could argue, yeah, they could print it out of thin air. No big deal. The problem is, and if you look at this chart, the military aid to Ukraine has come primarily from the United States ever since January up until now. The problem is that these are finite resources. Again, I just have to keep going back to this interview. If you haven't listened to the Cyrus Harding interview, now's a good time to revisit it because he made a prediction about September and also November. I recommend checking out the interview one more time. It's definitely worth your while to listen to more than once. Trust me, I know. But let's go back and listen to what Cyrus said about Ukraine And the problem, the tremendous problem and the destruction from within that the US is now facing because it keeps giving away its limited stockpile of weapons. And listen how Cyrus talks about this. Let's go ahead and play this clip.
So he's giving his least experienced troops combat experience using the oldest equipment he has. And what are we doing? We're shooting up all of our high-tech missiles at them. And we are running out of missiles. In fact, Ted Cruz and Rand Paul have sounded the bell. Look, we're using up all of our ammunition and giving it to Ukraine. And that, you can't go to Walmart and buy a 155 millimeter howitzer shell. Okay, these things have to be produced in lots and batches. You have to have quality control. It's a very technical process. They're not just something that shoots out of the end of a barrel and goes boom on the other end. They're very complex, and it takes time to produce these things. And we're giving all that stuff to Ukraine to shoot at Russia.
All right, so there you have it. He says Putin is sending he has been sending old tanks, old weapons, inexperienced troops out into battle, and the U.S. and Western nations, obviously Ukraine being a proxy of the United States, they're throwing the most advanced, expensive, limited weaponry at these tanks, at these infantry units. We are being depleted by design. The United States is being sucked dry, and it really is a scary time to be alive. But we have a hope, and we just have this confidence in Yeshua that other people don't have. It's sad. I wish, again, this is why it's so important to share the podcast, show and educate and teach people about the 70 shabua. We need to be providing food at God's table during this time, the spiritual food that is actually going to get people through this famine that we're already in. But when nuclear war happens and all of the communications are shut down, you need to have already prepared like a smart, wise virgin with your with your lamp filled with oil well in advance, with information like what I'm presenting already on your fingertips, printed out, studied. You already figured these things out, and you're ready. You're ready to see your master in heaven. So again, go to overcomebabylon.com, download the 70 Shabua Decoded Teaching. I promise it'll be worth your time. It's free. And keep an eye on that countdown. We were almost 365 days away from the abomination. I will have really awesome, the next episode is going to be so incredible. I can't wait to share what I have been shown from the scriptures regarding a really interesting prophetic topic that pertains to you and I. And it's so time sensitive. So keep an eye out for that. And be blessed. Shalom. I will catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in. I also wanted to mention, that the $1 billion studio is currently not being used because I'm in a $2 billion studio now that's way fancier. It's my Sukkot. It's my Sukkah for the Feast of Sukkot, which we're in the middle of. For those of us that have been celebrating with us, thank you for doing that. Thank you for just being community. And the Telegram group is amazing. If you haven't joined that, join the Telegram group. The private community is awesome there. Thank you guys for praying for me. Thank you for being a blessing in my life. I'm recovering. I'm not feeling 100%. Every time around this time, every single year is really, really tough. September's a hard year. It's a hard month of the year because 2 years ago, my wife and I miscarried. It was really, really hard, actually. And last year, there's some things that happened in September that weren't cool. And then this year, I was in the hospital with appendicitis. So, for some reason, fall feast, it's kind of hard. So thank you for those of you in the Telegram private group. Thank you for kind of just making it just a better time. Thank you for praying. Thank you for being there. Thank you for encouraging me with photos of your sukkah and stuff like that. It's just been really cool. And I'm just blessed to have you guys and have that community. So again, if you're looking for community, if you want to experience what I'm talking about, join the Telegram. I will post a link below. And that's all I have. Take care. hope you've been blessed by today's episode. If you could give me a like, drop a comment, share this content, or give me a 5-star rating, that would be great. And it would allow more people to hear this message. Whether you're watching on video sites like Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon, or listening in on the podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback. Also, make sure to visit overcomebabylon.com for more articles, reports, and other great info that I don't always have time to cover here in the podcast. All right, that's all I have for now. I'll see you next time.